Well, am I social distancing enough? Hi, tree. Social distancing. That's a term that I'm sure you're all very familiar with at this point, because that's what we've all been doing for the last about 2, some cases 3 months now. It's hard to believe that so much has happened in 2020, and right now it's only May. We're barely halfway into the year, and the whole world has basically changed. And that's the thing. I keep hearing people say, I can't wait until this is over. I can't wait until all of this is finished. I just can't wait for life to get back to normal. And I totally understand where everyone is coming from when they say stuff like that, but from being real, the thought of things going back to normal, honestly, at this point, every single day, it just seems like that really isn't going to happen. At least not in the way that people think. Life, as we know it, has changed, and I would say it's changed permanently. And I mean that in both small ways and big ways. Things as simple as giving someone a hug or a handshake or a kiss, right now that's met with apprehension. That's the whole concept behind social distancing or physical distancing. It's putting a barrier between you and everybody around you, all because of, COVID-19. And now that's basically going to completely alter the way that we interact. Those social norms that I just talked about are probably going to be looked at with a raised eyebrow from now on, and everything else on a much greater scale is also going to have to change. Congregating in large areas now, that's going to be seen as almost taboo, at least for a time. So things like sports stadiums, arenas, concert halls, movie theaters, big malls, hotels, the amusement parks, these things that we're totally used to. Before all this, we were just totally cool with going to, didn't give it much of a second thought. Now, people are always going to be thinking twice about that, especially those who were health conscious before the situation and are now even more so. And that's just the thing. Messages like wash your hands, wearing a mask, these things are going to be repeated, have been repeated nonstop for the last few months, and will likely continue to do so for possibly, if not a few years, maybe even longer than that. It might just become the norm to see people wearing a mask. It might become the norm to see people nodding their heads instead of even fist bumping. All these things, again, that we're used to are likely going to go away. And I talked about before about how, places of congregation are going to be looked at with a different viewpoint. Even travel. Take for instance, I was supposed to be on a trip with some friends to Europe, or coming down to the end of it, had things been, normal. But now, even traveling to another country, that's going to take on a whole new form, because airplanes, airports, any transportation hubs have always been seen as a hotbed of germs, and now even more so that people are more aware of it, they're going to be more wary of doing so. And the way that the companies behind all these mass transit systems operate are also going to have to change. Before all of this, the whole concept was stuff as many people into a single vehicle as possible. That's how you maximize efficiency. That's how you maximize profit. If 500 people on a cruise ship, that's going to make way more money than 250. But now, in order to allow for social distancing, that ship may have to sail with only 250 passengers. That flight might have to be only 30% filled. That train might only run with just a couple dozen people at a time. And that bus and that taxi. You see where I'm going with this? Again, things that were normal, that we did every single day, especially depending on where you lived. Your life may have even depended on taking these modes of transportation and going in these high traffic areas such as malls and city streets and plazas and so parks, places that were so common, things that were so common, now are going to be looked at with a raised eyebrow, as I said. And it's crazy. And the fallout from that, is economic, on an economic scale, because now that, these things now have to be adapted to smaller amounts of people, that means prices are likely going to go up, which is ironic because so many people all over the world have lost their jobs because of this pandemic. Layoffs, furloughs, all you see across headlines across the world is economic downturns left and right. And for a country like here, the Bahamas, it's a big deal. We're a very small country, only roughly 400-ish thousand people, and our economy is based almost completely on tourism. And so it's a one big circle. Now people don't have money like they used to. Traveling has always been considered a luxury unless, it was for something that was actually super important. But traveling for vacation, for leisure, that's of course a luxury, especially if you go internationally. And so now people are going to be way more wary of that and all the extra checks that are going to have to be put in place for stuff like air travel and cruise travel. Even those who can still do it might just say that's too much effort. So for a country like this, where we rely on tourism dollars, it's a big deal. Right now, our borders have been closed for over a month, roughly a month and a half, going into 2 months, and the effects can be seen all over the country. Because even if your job isn't in tourism here, because the economy is based so heavily on it, again, even if your job isn't in tourism, you're still affected by something like this happening. Because if there's no tourism dollars coming in, that means our biggest money generators aren't making money, which causes an economic downturn. And with an economic downturn, that means the local economy is struggling. And if the local economy is struggling, local businesses, again, things that are separated from tourism, also have less money coming in. So it's just one big circle, as I said. And even in places that aren't really necessarily tourist hotbeds, just the fact that businesses have had to been shut down, people have had to be laid off, so many people want to go back to work, and yet for a lot of people their place of work is just not, either doesn't exist or may not necessarily accept them back. Look at it this way: if there was a city with just 1,000 people and 500 businesses were in that city employing each of those 1,000 people, now after this whole pandemic there might be only 250 places of business, which means that they could only employ 500 people. So what happens to the remaining 500? Exactly, they're in hot water. Now multiply that situation across major cities all over the world, millions and millions of people dealing with something like this. It's crazy. To say what's going to happen next, to say when this whole thing is going to end, questions like that, I don't even bother to think about anymore, because you really just don't know. You don't know. You can't say for sure what's going to happen next, because this whole situation has been ever changing. Basically on a daily basis, new things are coming up, things are being adapted, new rules are being made, new situations are sprouting up out of the ground. There's so many things happening all at the same time. There's so many moving parts to this situation that the phrase just go with the flow and the advice to take one day at a time, those have been ringing in my mind like crazy, because at this point I've basically given up on trying to figure it all out, trying to theorize or wonder, how is this going to work? How is that going to work? Like so many people, I had plans for this year, and now every single day I wake up still thinking about the things that I want to do or plan to do, but ever more believing that they're just not going to happen this year. And people keep saying, like, I just can't wait for 2020 to be over. Let's just, throw the whole year away. I agree with you, but that isn't to say that next year could be just as bad, if not worse. Yes, I'm being pessimistic, but I also think at this point, it's necessary. You gotta be realistic, because hyping yourself up for next year, thinking that this thing it's going to end on December 31st and by January 1st of 2021 it's all going to be over, doubt it. Very unrealistic thought. But man, it's been a wild year for me. And I'm not just talking about this year, I'm talking about last year too. Like, me being here, if you've watched any of my past vlogs, you would see that I was in Ecuador and Peru for a time, and I plan to go back there. And you know, I've already been here much longer than I had intended for, and now I am literally stuck for who knows how long at this point. But again, this is just my life, so I can only imagine how other people must feel. People with families, people who have elderly ones in their family, people who are sick themselves. You know, this pandemic has changed lives. You know, it's taken friends and family members away. It's wiped out jobs. And again, it's changed this social norms that we've become accustomed to. But really, all we can do at this point is take one day at a time. Just like anybody, I think about the future a lot. I think about the things I want to do, not just in the short term, but even in the long term. And if this situation has taught me anything, or rather reinforced something, it's that you really never know what's going to happen next. Lives have been changed overnight because of this pandemic, and it just shows you how fragile life really is. The things that you could work so hard for, they really can disappear. People who have been employed by companies for many years are now jobless. You know, like, they weren't thinking that something like this would have happened, and the last 15 years they spent with that company would just come to an end all of a sudden when they didn't even do anything wrong. You know, nobody plans for that. People who were healthy before are in hospitals right now, or in worse condition than that. So many things that have changed so quickly, so it really does show life is fragile. Do try to appreciate as much moments as possible, and again, just take it one day at a time. And looking at the future, the normal that we had going down to the end of last year, that's going to go down in history, because that was the last time life as we knew it functioned. Because from now on, things are going to be different. This is the new normal.